Business Spotlight, brought to you by Cross Rhythms and Baba Baboon.
I'm Sonya Farrall. This is Business Spotlight in partnership with Cross Rhythms City Radio and Baba Baboon. Joining me in the studio this week, we have Claire Rushton-Plant of MiniMe Mindfulness. Hi Claire, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us here in the Cross Rhythms studio. MiniMe Mindfulness sounds very, very interesting. Do you want to just share a little bit about what it's all about and what you do?
Absolutely. So we teach children from the age of 3 upwards, all about their internal superpowers. So a superpower for us is a strategy or a tool that you could use to help you feel more confident, or to help you build your resilience, or to just make you feel much better about yourself. And we teach those strategies basically to help children so that when life throws a curveball, you have got the tools, and lots of them, to kind of pull upon to help you kind of overcome that difficulty, so that you are in charge of the difficulty rather than it being in charge of you.
And I believe, Claire, you've worked in education yourself prior to this and going into the business as, a high school teacher for many, many years. What was it that sort of, inspired you, or, made you, just want to go over and make a change and set up on your own and go and help all these lovely young children?
So there are a number of reasons, really, mostly driven by COVID, to be honest with you. So in the return to the classroom after the kind of many lockdowns, I had so many students who had just been kind of middle of the road, average children before we had gone into lockdown, who came back with so many mental health issues. So children who would no longer look you in the face, they had lost their kind of social capacity to interact with each other. I had a lot of students who'd grown their hair so it completely covered their faces, so that, they just kind of retreated into their shells quite a lot, which was really sad. And unfortunately, teaching Shakespeare wasn't really helping with that. And as much as he will always have a tiny place in my heart, I felt like I knew what I needed to do to support those children, but my hands were tied by my workload, by the capacity I had within my timetable to support them. And I wanted something that was more flexible as well, that kind of worked more around my family, rather than my children being in before and after school club every day. It just kind of gave me a little bit more flexibility. And that's where MiniMe Mindfulness came in.
Okay, and on that journey then, since starting the business, and you helped, young children from the age of 3 plus.
Yes.
Going up even to supporting some adults as well.
Absolutely.
What have you seen, and when you talk about superpowers and these inner superpowers and the strategies, how would that process work, and how do the, young children, especially from that age, benefit from this?
So it's all about kind of growing that internal positive mindset. So the way that we teach mindfulness and mindset techniques is more in a positive way rather than a reactive way. So it's something that you would deliver to every child so that they then build that kind of inner strength themselves. So I kind of liken it a little bit to almost like a PE lesson. Like, you wouldn't teach PE just to the children that have got weight issues or don't exercise at home. You teach it to everybody because it's something that is part of a healthy lifestyle. It's part of, growing up to have strategies to look after yourself and prioritizing that element of self-care. And that's the way that we deliver mindfulness and mindset techniques as well. Okay.
So them strategies, going back many years ago now, Claire, let's go back to like when I was at school, which is a long time ago.
Yeah.
I remember certain things. I remember certain things even from nursery, as daft as it sounds,
Yeah.
like doing little arty things and all that. But this was just, for me anyway, tell me if I'm wrong, but these sorts of strategies and what you're doing and how you do it weren't even around then?
I think that they were, but they were more kind of geared towards people who already had an issue, rather than it becoming like a leveler for everybody. I think with the way that society has changed, certainly since I was at school, more years ago than I cared to admit to, life is much faster paced. The expectations on children are much higher. what we're expecting children to be able to juggle all at once is much more kind of increased than it was. So even just things like reception age children and year one children, the gap between those 2 year groups, where you're playing all day and doing a little bit of phonics maybe in reception, and then you're sitting at a desk full day in year one, is a massive leap. Well, how do we get those children prepared for that? How do we allow them to kind of still be able to express their emotions, even though, you know, things are obviously a lot more strict than they were? And I don't remember really kind of sitting at a desk properly in school till I was about 7. You know, expectations have just kind of massively increased in that time, but our kind of mental capacity to deal with them hasn't necessarily improved. And that's what this is about.
Why do you think that is? Is it, like you say, is it just, again, with technologies, is it social media, is it all that, you know, like you say, this fast-paced living, is that, you know, from what you can see in your experience, having a massive impact?
Absolutely. So children that I work with in nursery settings, for example, I've got some children who I've been going to the same nursery since September 22. So some of them have been having like a fortnightly session that whole time. And they would cry at the thought of just looking at their face in a mirror. Now they're able to kind of articulate positive sentences about themselves. They've got a much more kind of growth mindset. So if they couldn't do it to begin with, they don't give up at the first sign of a hurdle. They realise that that's part of a learning curve and it's not going to come straight away, and they're willing to give it a try. So I was doing mindful movement in the same nursery with them yesterday, and just getting them into like a yoga position, for example. They were very wobbly to begin with, but we tried it 3 or 4 times, and by the time they'd got to the 4th try, they were like, actually, I can do this. I might still be a little bit wobbly, but that's okay. And that comes with just practice. And, you know, that's all about kind of building their resilience, isn't it? Giving them that opportunity to grow and try again. So
maybe from what you said there, is using sort of different techniques to have awareness and understanding about what is going on in yourself.
Absolutely.
And as a young child, I suppose growing up and going into teenage years as well, I mean, that must have, again, from what you're seeing and from the work that you've done, you've seen certain children grow up, you know, getting older and older. Can you see again how those techniques are still there years later?
Absolutely. So it's kind of about setting those foundations early on, and it's about, you know, you might not grasp it straight away, but it's laying that foundation. It's about building on that. It's about giving you the opportunity to kind of explore different ways of achieving the same goal so that you can achieve, basically. But also it's about them having that opportunity to express themselves, articulate their emotions, recognize what they're feeling is this particular emotion, rather than it could be this, it could be something else, and being able to kind of be more self-aware because of it.
And what about in adults then? I mean, you're working with adults as well, and do you see, again, you know, these things which could even stem back to when they were maybe a child?
So when I kind of first came to mindfulness, it was about
adults as well then, or even children, you know, growing up and getting to teenage years, looking at the careers and different choices, and you know, going into whether it is employment or, you know, entrepreneurial spirit, going into starting their own business. Again, from how would you describe from your point of view how it can help with those sort of career or employment opportunities?
So for me, it's about being a confidence builder. So the way that you talk about yourself in your own head will make or break your success. So if you're constantly beating yourself up and saying you're not good enough, you're never going to feel as though you're good enough. You're never going to feel like you've achieved anything. Whereas if you're using the voice that you would use to your best friend, you would never say some of the things to your best friend that you say about yourself inside your own head. So it's about flipping that switch a little bit and recognising that that's just a thought, and a thought is not a fact. So that you're kind of in control of that, and rather than it being in control of you. I also think it's about taking those actions. So we kind of tend to make it so that it's 5 actions in a day. So once you've ticked those off and you feel like you've really achieved something, it's going to give you that kind of positive boost, isn't it? And then you can kind of tackle the next batch. And we also look at obviously guided meditation is the way that I start my day every day, and it's also the way that we start our sessions with children and with adults, because it just clears your mind, so that you're not having all of the thoughts all at once. So we use the analogy of like a snow globe. If you shake up a snow globe, you've got all of that kind of whizzing around at once, and it just makes everything feel really overwhelming and really foggy. Like you can't really see, the wood for the trees, basically. Whereas when you allow that guided meditation to just allow your brain to settle, you can then really focus in on, the one or two things that have absolutely got to be done. And then when they're done, okay, you still got quite a clear mind. It's that sense of achievement as well.
Okay, Claire, I'm just going to ask you one more thing before you go.
Okay.
And that is going back to all your experience again in education, your experience now with MiniMe Mindfulness. And we've talked about this fast-paced living that we're all in. And there's nothing much we can do about in a way of how things are going, I suppose, apart from, the certain strategies and how you can help with techniques and how you can deal with certain things. But what would you like to see, or, how do you see the future for more young people growing up? How would you like to see that and going into maybe even a more busier world in the next 10 years? Yeah,
so I feel as though what I deliver now needs to be part of the curriculum. It needs to be something that every single child has access to from an early age. And I don't just mean that, obviously, that will make my business go through the roof, but I just mean from the perspective of, if we're looking at a mental health crisis, which is what the country seems to be in the grip of at the moment, partly COVID, the reintegration of, back into normal society after being in lockdown for so many months. But also I think people took a step back during COVID and they were able to pause, which is what mindfulness allows you to do. And they were able to kind of look at their lives and see, why am I running around, 1,000 miles an hour all of the time, and I'm collapsing on the end of the day on a Friday with no energy to enjoy myself over the weekend. I think we need to build in more of that balance and recognizing that just because society tells us that this is what we should be aiming for, that doesn't necessarily mean that that is right for everybody. So think about, the educational pathways that are available to students nowadays. Not everybody needs to go down the university route. Not everybody needs to go down, the T-level route. There are so many opportunities and so many options, and you don't have to decide that at 14. So I went into teaching, went into working in education when I was 19, when I was still doing my degree. I never saw myself leaving education, but I made a complete career change at 39 and just started my whole life again, and that's okay. And brilliant. I kind of love it now.
Brilliant. Claire, honestly, thank you so much for coming here and joining me on Business Spotlight. It's been an absolute pleasure, and to learn more about, your career, your background and what you do. No doubt we'll be speaking to you sometime soon in the future. But for now, that's Claire Rushton-Plant from MiniMe Mindfulness here on Business Spotlight with me, Sonya Farrall, in partnership with Cross Rhythm City Radio and Baba Baboon.
Business Spotlight, shining a light on our local business community. Brought to you by Cross Rhythms and Baba Baboon.